Coming up.
Because it's okay if we're seen as weak. It's okay if we cry. We're emotional women, right? But if a man breaks down, he is seen as weak and his reputation is destroyed, right?
Yeah,
his friends make fun of him. His coworkers make fun of him. So I think there's so much, and then we get into like toxic masculinity and patriarchy, and that could be a whole other podcast episode. But I just think it's important to acknowledge that like we can start to break down some of those stigmas, and I think it's starting to happen, and things like therapy are becoming more normalized.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. A couple years ago, I went through one of the toughest health episodes of my life. I found myself in a really, really dark place, and honestly, it felt like the world was caving in all around me. I didn't know where to turn or what to do. I knew I needed something, but it just seemed like nothing was working. In therapy didn't work for me in the past. But then, with the encouragement of my wife, I decided to give today's sponsor BetterHelp a try, even though I was a little skeptical at first. And let me say, it was so different. I connected with a therapist, and simply talking with her helped me lower my anxiety in ways I didn't expect. Sometimes it's just about having someone outside of your family to listen, and BetterHelp made that so easy. What I love most about BetterHelp is the flexibility. You don't have to commit to months of sessions if that's not what you need. Sometimes a few sessions are all it takes to get some relief, to take the edge off, and start feeling a little better. Plus, they have a wide selection of therapists. You can find someone you really click with, and if you don't, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. If you're like me, someone who gets stuck in their head a lot, BetterHelp might be the answer. And right now, if you visit betterhelp.com/sold-separately or use the link in this video's description, you can get 10% off your first month. So give it a try. Remember, you can't take care of anyone else in your life until you take care of yourself.
Auto sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, on with the show.
Hi, my name is Maisy Cyr, and my happiness is spending time with the people I love and being with my dogs.
Okay, hello, Maisy Cyr. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
Me too. I'm very excited to talk to you. I think what your work is so interesting and how you kind of approach everything. You work with a lot of youth and a lot of families, right? In a whole wide aspect of different roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had quite a few roles throughout my career so far, but almost all of them have been youth-centered, which also involves supporting families in different capacities. So it's definitely something I'm passionate about.
What do you love so much about social work?
I think helping people find their voice. I think we've all been dealt different circumstances. We've all come into hard times now and again. And I think helping people find their potential and realizing that they are capable of way more than maybe even they realized, I think is part of what drove me to that career in the first place, and what kind of propels me to keep doing it.
And one thing I loved about when I was kind of reading up on you about this idea of self-advocacy, right? You're big on that. What exactly does that mean to you or consist of on that approach?
So I've done a lot of work kind of in the patient advocacy sphere. So working with medical providers to better listen to their patients, and working with patients to better advocate for themselves. So I think in the medical setting specifically, patients who may not be familiar with that type of setting may not realize that they are allowed to ask questions and know sort of what's going on with their own body. I have the utmost respect for doctors and providers and nurses. And I think sometimes they forget that they speak a whole different language. And so I think giving patients specifically and family members the tools and language to be able to get their questions answered kind of helps bridge that gap. So they go home with more information, they go home feeling more comfortable with their own care. And whether they're at home or in the hospital, they have a better understanding of what's happening in their body, which can help alleviate some of the fear they may be experiencing and may help them kind of better understand how to advocate for what they need or what isn't being addressed. And I think that goes for a lot of different settings. A lot of people, I think, take for granted the communication skills they may have developed throughout life. And so I think kind of stepping back and being able to arm people with that knowledge and those skills can be really empowering.
Do you think we kind of forget when we go see the doctor that we are allowed to ask those questions and we are allowed to find out what's going on with us and be able to understand it and feel good about it? I feel like sometimes there's this veil, like we think that the doctor is above us somehow and that we're not allowed to, kind of figure out what's going on with our own body. So have you found that with some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a power dynamic at play. They do have a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise, and they spent a lot of money and time on education. And for that, they should be, incredibly proud. But I do think it creates a real dichotomy where patients are sort of seen as less than, not even intentionally, but just sort of subconsciously. And I think our healthcare system also really prioritizes quantity over quality. So doctors are often pressured to see more patients than they have time for. Floors and clinics are often understaffed, so they have to rush through the patients that they do have. So I don't necessarily think it's their fault. I think often providers do the absolute best they can with the time and resources that they have. But I think that sort of pressure to hurry up and check all the boxes that they need to check doesn't really give patients the time to feel comfortable asking what they need to ask, or even asking for clarification to know what they need to ask,
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a broken system overall, isn't it? I mean,
hugely.
No one's really, I guess, the doctors are trying to do what they can do. They're trying to see everybody. Like you said, they're overworked, they're overbooked with patients a lot of times, and dealing with insurance and other things. And you do feel sometimes when you go to the visit, doctor's visit, you feel kind of, maybe not by them specifically, but you feel that kind of urgency of rush, like you've got to get through because they're busy. But I think we need to kind of slow down, don't we? I mean, kind of need to know that time is our time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think people forget that we use the term consumers a lot kind of in the patient advocacy world, because we're consuming a product, we're consuming a service. We are customers. And I think we forget that. Yeah.
Wow. I noticed that you introduced this term trauma-informed. What is that approach in your work? Kind of walk me through that.
So the term trauma-informed just sort of alludes to going through the world with a lens, assuming that everybody has their own experiences, and rather than asking what's wrong with you, asking what happened to you, what have you gone through? And having a trauma-informed lens can help create a sense of empathy, because often when people are, what we perceive to be difficult or contentious or looking for conflict, it's often the result of something much deeper that maybe they haven't even worked through themselves. Maybe something happened when they were younger, or something happened recently, or it sort of triggered something in their brain to send them into this like fight or flight mode. And so having a trauma-informed lens and doing work in a trauma-informed way just sort of keeps that in the back of your mind and allows you to go into situations with a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more empathy and understanding, and a little bit more patience, just knowing that we don't know what this other person has been through. We don't know what experiences they have. We don't know how they've been treated. And so we want to just kind of start from, baseline and learn as much about them as we can.
So it kind of takes away the clinical aspect and makes it all human, right? It kind of puts everybody in that kind of being human first, and then a different way of talking about it.
Yeah. I think it just sort of gives us a glimpse into the other person's humanity. Absolutely.
Yeah. You do a lot of work with youth. Does that group hold a special place in your heart? Do you love working with youth?
I do. I really do. I think they are, I love seeing them like recognize their potential. And they, adults have kind of been molded into who they're going to be. Not to say that people can't change. People absolutely can change. But I think young people often have a more open mind. They're more willing to try things. They're more willing to entertain different perspectives and think outside the box. And they often just bring and I'm generalizing obviously, but most of the time they bring sort of a fresh sense of creativity and innovation in a way that adults just may not have time or energy for,
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, and you're able probably to, I don't know, that may be wrong, but do they open up a little bit more than adults, maybe guarded and not talk as much? Do kids kind of share more details or give you a little bit more insight into their lives or what they're going through?
I think sometimes. I think a lot of the young people that I've worked with have had a lot of life in their short years, on this earth. And so they, some of the young people that I've worked with may be more guarded than some young people who haven't had quite so many adverse experiences. But I think once you take the time to get to know them and see them as people too, that's when they open up. I think we see kids and young people or youth as sort of people to be. And in doing that, we sort of invalidate some of what they're experiencing. And I think when you get on their level and you recognize that they are people and the life that they're living is their reality right now, that's really empowering to them. And I know I keep going back to that word, but I think so much of what I do and what I find so satisfying about the work I do is that sense of empowerment that we give them.
Yeah. And knowing that, I mean, I can't imagine what that must feel like. You're doing so many great things with giving a voice to the voiceless almost. And I know that for the people who may find themselves overwhelmed or lost in the system, what does that feel like to know that you're able to guide them a little bit or help them find what they need and resources to get through a tough situation?
I think, I hear that phrase a lot, like giving a voice to the voiceless. And I think the way we can flip that is that they aren't voiceless. People just aren't listening, know? And so by taking a second and like you said, slowing down, we can take the time to hear those voices and help them learn how to make their voices louder. I think navigating the systems that we exist within, whether it's healthcare or housing or childcare, or just accessing, food and services, it's so intentionally complicated. And so being able to give them the skills to get the things that they need, get their basic needs met, that's when they can start moving up towards that self-actualization and realizing their potential. So I think it's really I've reached a point in my career where I don't want to be the one to fix people. I want people to understand that they are capable of fixing themselves if and when they want to, and I can help them find and understand the skills and tools to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's more about finding the right conditions and opportunities, right, for them to be able to, like you said, have people hear their voice. They have a voice and they just need to know kind of who to talk to or where to express themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have a story that really just stays with you, that where you've helped someone, or a special case that just really touched your heart?
Um,
Kind of put you on the spot a little bit. Sorry for that.
That's okay. So I worked in an after school program for a long time, well, a couple of years, with kindergartners through fifth graders. And our fifth grade boys were kind of rough. A lot of them had stuff going on at home. I was also the bus monitor, because that was really a challenging time for them to shift out of like school mode into home mode, because home mode was not safe for a lot of them. And so you watched them, you talked about like having their guard down, like you watched that guard go back up when they went back home. So that was really interesting to see. But working with my fifth grade boys, we talked a lot about like social emotional learning, self-awareness, acknowledging like what's going on in your body and what you're feeling and how you can respond to that and cope with those more difficult feelings. And so I remember we were working on not being quite so reactive. We had some incidents, and it always came back to like, well, he started it and I was going to finish it. I'm like, we can't do that. And so we talked a lot about like how we can't control how somebody acts, but we can control how we respond to it. And I remember one time, one of my fifth grade boys who had been having a particularly hard time that year came and found me, and he had been like running and he was out of breath. And he was like, Miss Maisy, so-and-so just said blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow, that must have been really hard for you to like step away from that. But like, he was like, I remember like, we can't control what people say, but we can control what we do after that. And he came and found me to help like intervene and manage the situation. And I just think like that was, sometimes it feels like what we do doesn't sink in or doesn't make a difference or like isn't, even applicable sometimes. We're just like, yeah, kids will be kids, blah, blah, blah. But in that instant, he remembered like, I have control over what my next move is, and I'm going to go get a trusted adult to help me because I can't handle what I'm going to do. And so that sticks with me because that's a lesson that I hope, I don't know, but I hope that he, took with him into adulthood, because I know some adults who still don't know how to, apply that to their everyday life. So I think just like, like I said, I think we take advantage of the skills that we learn growing up in, a safe, loving household. Basic things like respect and empathy and, self-awareness. And not everybody has those or has the opportunity to really hone those. And so it was really cool to be able to create that opportunity for the young people I was working with and see it being applied in their life and being the trusted adult that they felt like they could go to. So that just like is a memory that kind of, stuck with me in terms of working with young people.
That's awesome. Growing up, did you have this desire to help people like you do now? Did you have someone in your life that kind of kept you on track or showed you some things like that you just described in that story? Where did this all start?
I am incredibly privileged. Let me just start by saying that I'm a cis, het, white, middle-class woman. I grew up in a very loving, healthy family. My mother has a degree in early childhood education, so I understood my own development as I was developing. I have an older sister who I absolutely worship and look up to, who also has a higher education degree in public health. So we were kind of born into advocacy and caring for others. I think my mom really just instilled in us that, always do the next right thing, kind of. If we would see unhoused people, she took the time to explain to us how they may have gotten there. I was exposed to all kinds of different media when I was younger. So we grew up I was a theater kid growing up. So I learned about all kinds of different cultures and ways of living and relationships. And she took the time to explain to me about the world and helped me figure out my place in it. And I think just by teaching me things like empathy and respect, I kind of developed the desire to help care for people. And then during my undergrad degree, that was kind of when I realized, okay, I exist within the context of these larger systems. Mm-hmm. And I may not be able to fix all of these systems, but I can help people understand their place within these systems and how they can better navigate them. So I think it just all of the pieces kind of fell into place for me to kind of land in this field. My roles have varied, but it's always come back to helping people realize their voice,
Wow. Sounds like you have a great mom. That's a lot of great lessons she taught you as you were coming up. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, my dad too. I had a very healthy nuclear family. They were still incredible, Yeah. But yeah.
Why do you think it is so important for us to learn self-worth? And we all stumble. We all need help occasionally from time to time. But that motivation that we find within ourselves to make it better or to get through a problem, why do you think that's so important? Especially, I would think now with young people on social media, you see a lot of fake stuff. I guess I'll use the word fake, but it just, you know what I mean? It's like a highlight reel of people's lives, and it brings on a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. Have you seen that? And have you kind of told people okay, this is not real. Everybody's life is different, and the stuff you're seeing online is not what their life is really all about all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that sense of self-worth, it kind of acts as an armor. So I think there's sort of two different ways we can armor up, right? There's the defensive, shutting down, anger at the world, trying to buy your way out of things, trying to use substances to get out of things. We develop all of these different coping mechanisms. And I think self-worth is when you realize that those things aren't real, And I think part of that as an educator comes back to giving people the skills to understand what is and isn't real. And it's getting more challenging as, AI gets more complex and media gets better and face tuning gets better. It's harder to tell that that's not what that person actually looks like, you know? And so I think that self-worth and that resilience is what helps people say, I don't need that. I don't need to look like that. I don't need to own that, but it's hard. Even as an adult, it's hard. I find myself looking at vacuums now instead of clothes and makeup. I'm I need that new vacuum. I need that new dishwasher. It just changes.
Oh yeah.
But I think within that, there's also developing a sense of gratitude too. So being grateful, I know it sounds really cheesy, but being grateful for the things that you already have, and maybe even taking a moment to write down all the things that you're grateful for. That helps some neural networks in your brain form. So instead of thinking I need this will make me feel better, realizing how much you have, and the things that are important. But I also think representation matters too. And I think that's part of the problem with media is that a lot of young people don't see themselves in the people that they see on TikTok and Instagram and, other forms of media and entertainment. And that's really invalidating too. So I think as we sort of progress as a society, like advertising getting more inclusive is important. And I think even like the development of, TikTok has kind of shown more of real people's lives, but it also plants that seed of like, if I filmed myself enough, I might go viral and become famous. So
Right.
it's really challenging because that doesn't happen to everyone, but there's that possibility. So yeah, I think that like that self-worth, that self-esteem, it helps act as a barrier from kind of that FOMO or that like not good enoughness,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so a good point about writing down what you have and what you're grateful for. Because if you were to make a list of needs versus wants, I think most people would find that they're doing okay as far as what they need, to sustain life. But there are always those, and that's advertising. That's how people get us, like you said, the vacuums and things that they try to market to us, and we need that. We've got to have that. So yeah, it's all it's very interesting how the psyche works and how that really plays on happiness and self-worth. So many aspects out there, and sometimes I worry a lot about young people just getting influenced on social media and having so much depression set in at such an early age. I don't know. Does that ever hit hard with you? Like, my gosh, it's a lot different than years before social media.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, I want to be super transparent too and say like, there's a real challenge to accessing mental health resources. So I think even as we as a society start to destigmatize mental illness and mental health challenges, getting help for those isn't easy. Like we talked about the complexities of the healthcare system, and mental health is no different. Like you have to have the right insurance. You have to be able to get to an appointment or have technology for telehealth or be able to pay out of pocket. And it's like financially there are barriers, geographically there are barriers. And being in, the field of social work, I see the barriers even just to entering the field, so there's a shortage of professionals because even just getting into the field, you have to have a certain degree of privilege. So I think like we could do better to start to look at how to make those things more accessible. And, we have things like BetterHelp and Talkspace and stuff like that. But even those are not there. Something is better than nothing, sort of. But there's been a lot of like problematic things that have come out of both of those. But I think it's like we are creating these problems and then being like, how do we fix them? Don't know. And we have the answers. We just can't make it happen. So
why do you think there is still today such a stigma with mental health? We see that almost as like if someone tells you, I have a therapist appointment or I'm going to counseling or whatever, it's like sometimes people see that as, oh, there's something wrong with you. Why do we still today not value, I guess, our mental health like we would our physical health? I mean, it just doesn't seem to be on an equal playing field with how people see that.
I think it's a real can of worms question.
For sure.
Because I think a couple of things. So like when you're sick, when you have a cold or the flu, it's usually visible. There are symptoms, you can see them. People believe you when you have snot dripping out of your nose and you're hacking up a lung. It's harder to see when people are experiencing anxiety or depression or obsessive compulsive tendencies, or we think it looks a certain way. And if that person doesn't, fit what we think depression looks like, then it's probably not that bad, And I think a lot of it comes from kind of the life that many of us have to live. Like we have to work to pay the bills, and a lot of us don't like our job. I'm an exception, thankfully, but a lot of us don't. We just work to pay the bills. It's kind of, we're on the hamster wheel of life. And to improve that is a combination of things, medication, therapy, but also stepping away from the things that are making you miserable, and I think that's not possible for a lot of people. And I think like that involves looking at kind of the capitalist society that we live in. That's just like, you need to make money, you need to pay bills, you need to go to work, the cycle continues. And so to step out of that cycle would mean that we aren't like producing anything anymore. So it's a big question.
Yeah, for sure. And also I think in the workplace, it's like people want to hide that. You don't want anybody to know that you're going for therapy, or, it's like, you don't want anybody to perceive you as being weak or less than, which, it'd be nice if we didn't have that going on. And if we took mental health and made it as important as physical health, as far as getting insurance and paying for things, and as you said, opening it up to more people. It's one of those things that, gosh, it is everything. I mean, your physical health affects your mental health and vice versa. I mean, it literally could make you sick, if you're off in your mental health. So if you're feeling down or depressed and it's just gone ongoing, so important. But yeah, you're right. The resources are not there for so many people, whether they don't have insurance or what other, issues may come up.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because I am a woman, obviously, and it's a lot less stigmatized among me and my coworkers than some of my male colleagues. And I think that's also worth looking at a little bit more too, because it's even more stigmatized for men in society, right? Because it's okay if we're seen as weak. It's okay if we cry. We're emotional women, right? But if a man breaks down, he is seen as weak and his reputation is destroyed, right?
Yeah,
his friends make fun of him. His coworkers make fun of him. So I think there's so much, and then we get into like toxic masculinity and patriarchy, and that could be a whole other podcast episode. But I just think it's important to acknowledge that like we can start to break down some of those stigmas. And I think it's starting to happen, and things like therapy are becoming more normalized. But I do think it's still very one-sided in terms of like looking at things in a binary lens. I think it's still far more stigmatized for men, especially in the workplace and the corporate world. They can't show any sort of weakness or emotion, or their authority is questioned, their ability is questioned. So I think that's just sort of worth noting as well.
Yeah, so true. If a man has similar feelings or shows any kind of emotion, sometimes, they're labeled as one way or the other. And it's, sometimes men don't express their emotions like they should really. And there are people in their lives that maybe some people don't have that luxury of having someone they can share it with, but men too have to open up and be able to express what they're going through, or what kind of bad thoughts go into dark places. I mean, that's so important, to be able to express that, because we're expected, I guess, like you said, men are expected to carry everything just stoic and not have any kind of emotion at all. And that's just not reality, really.
Right.
I think
it's men who perpetuate that, like I obviously I'm generalizing again, but like we don't mind when men show emotion. It's other men, so it's like until they become a safe place for each other. Like I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a young adult male, and we were talking about how to more articulately communicate what you're feeling, and he's like, yeah, I tried that, and she said, why are you talking like a girl? I was like, oh no. So I think it goes back to that self-worth and resilience we were talking about too, right? Like you need to trust that like it's okay for you to do that, and maybe it's the people that you are surrounding yourself with who are not supporting that are making it challenging. Like what you're doing isn't inherently wrong. They just aren't used to it because of that stigma and those stereotypes,
Yep. You have to have a safe place to go to for sure. You can't, if you have somebody have that attitude, you're probably never going to open up again if somebody tells you stop acting that way.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you're doing so many amazing things, my friend. I am so proud to talk to you. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a good opportunity to reflect. So I appreciate it.
Happiness Sold Separately is created and hosted by Jason Hensley and is produced by Makash Films. Narration by Lauren Gobis. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs immediate help, call the National Mental Health Hotline at 866-903-3787. We would be honored if you would rate, share, and subscribe.
Aye, that's a good one.